All right, everyone, I'm going to try to make it quick. A video for December EOC training. In the email yesterday, you got a link with all of this information. Obviously, number one, you need to know where you're testing. Okay, go ahead and pause it and study this. If not, you can look at the tabs down below. We have student testers. Room are attached now. It's not the biggest deal for you. And lastly, the floater schedule in case that affects any of you. The kids are going to be given to you on a roster that you'll pick up in the testing room. It'll look like this with a seating chart at the bottom here. We always fill this seating chart by using the numbers corresponding here so we don't have to write down student names. I've crossed out the time. The time doesn't matter. We have a new system for test count, so I'm still learning it. And here, booklet ID has been crossed out as well in exchange for stop time. It's imperative that you write each student's stop time on the this one materials control paper that's attendance, stop time, and the seating chart below. Okay, here's where you're going to record present and absent. So this is what it looks like. Okay, moving on. We have a one pager is what we call it, but it truly is 3 pages. You can see here of step by step of what you need to do for testing. So nothing is left to question. You will get a copy of this in your test materials, and you can pick one up on Monday. But basically, I'm just going to run through this and kind of give the rundown. So on testing day, we need you to pick up materials between 7 and 7:15. I always arrive much earlier if you want to get there. Never leave your materials unattended. When you get to the classroom, you should start opening the student Chromebooks or the desktops if you have desktops and opening them up, clicking on apps, and then getting to the testing page. Because the first day, it takes a while for it to load. The subsequent days, it should just be there when you open the computer. Um, only staff that have signed an oath, which will be everybody, all the teachers that have signed an oath, are the ones that can handle test materials, and they will know who they are. In the testing room, I suggest visiting the room Monday afternoon to make sure everything is in there that's required. The rooms are covered, which is the teacher's responsibility who actually is in that room. And make sure there's a visible clock and just make sure nothing is kind of off the wall. Okay. Always, student cell phones should be powered off and collected. Along with the TA's phone, it should be out of sight. Cell phones can be redistributed once all the materials have left the testing room and have been returned. Student cell phones, backpacks and purses need to be away from their desks. If students have drinks or snacks, that needs to be stored away from their desks as well and can be consumed outside of the classroom during a break if they need it, but it's not going to stop their clock time. This is only for December. When the student finishes testing, you can make sure they've submitted their test, and you can send them out to the hall monitor and they'll write them a pass back to class. This is super important that when they finish, you write the stop time on your roster here. It's going to be right here. So we know when they left if there's any discrepancy about kids, kind of doing what they want after they leave. You can allow one student out of your room at a time on a restroom pass. You'll have the green one. And they'll be taken care of out there. Also, there's a restroom log that you should have the students or you fill out of what time they left the room and what time they returned. It's really best if the teacher fills that information out, but just make sure that it gets done. In the event of an emergency or power outage or internet outage, please stop testing and note the time and let us know. If you can continue testing, go ahead and do that. Down here next is how to log in. I would suggest pausing the video at this time and reading the steps. The rooms 1332 and 1334 are going to have desktop computers. Everybody else will have Chromebooks. The steps are very simple. We don't have the STAAR platform anymore. It's called Secure Test Browser. And that's in the apps. It's the second from the bottom. And then on desktop computers, There's an app on the desktop that's called Secure Test Browser app. It's like Texas. The other thing you need to know is when you go in, you may have to choose Texas if it's the first day. That's where we want to go, nothing else. Okay. Students will be testing all online, and their ticket contains their login information. Their TSDS number and first name and birth date will be on there. And the other thing you need for the students to log in is their session ID. Okay. These session IDs, so it's TSDS and first name, it's not birth date. My apologies. Um, and session ID. The session ID is connected to a test. So students are assigned to test by IDs. So there's no way a student can take the wrong test because we take care of that internally. So TSDS number, first name, and their session ID number. You're going to get a sheet with session ID numbers for all 5 tests for the week. But whatever it says at the top of your materials control form here, that's the test that you're giving to the kid. This is an interesting sheet because it has 2 different tests. This one's for Friday with a very small group. So you need to access 2 separate session IDs for that one. But any other test, if we go down further, like this is English 1. So you're going to access the English 1 session ID. Those session ID sheets are as secure as a student test ticket or a test book or an answer sheet. So those don't need to be posted up in the room and forgotten when you come to return materials. It's a very secure material. Directions this year, there's a whole new manual. It's very similar to years past, but there's kind of some updated language for the new Cambium system that we're using. Please review the directions. Here is a live link, and you also got a manual in your box. Please read them at least one time prior. In the appendix here, there's little pictures of the tools that are available inside the testing app. If a student asks you, what does this tool do? You'll go to the back of your manual and you will say, look at it, review it, say, oh, this is what it does. And you tell them what it does. You cannot use your hand and show them what it does. We can't do that. So you can simply educate them on what the tool does. Students with accommodations, it's pretty standard. The only thing that's new this year is we have something called auto text to speech. And that's for a student who would typically on a paper test have it be in an oral all room where the teacher would read the entire test to them. What this does is it force reads any of the text that's required to be read aloud to the student. So the student has to sit there and listen to what it's saying. After it runs its course, the student can go back and choose individual things to read. That's fine. So that's new this year, and it's going to be different for some kids if they're not familiar. The other one is text to speech. That's where the student goes in and chooses to highlight the things that they want to listen to. Remember that on the English test, there's a little circle with a face and a line through it with a speaker voice. Those parts cannot be read aloud, and the computer will not read them for students. So sometimes that takes them back a little bit too. Since we have a new system in a new test ticket, students who receive accommodations, you'll have a roster for them. But what you're going to need to do is write their accommodations on their testing ticket so you're aware and the student is aware of what they get. So that's something you can do on Monday when you come and visit me, or if you come super early on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, you can kind of sit down and go through those while you're accounting for your materials. It's possible that we missed an accommodation or a kid has an accommodation they're not supposed to have. If a kid is asking you about something that's missing, don't just push them off. Just say, let me call Miss Christ and we'll get confirmation. Okay, if the student's being adamant and really disruptive, just tell them to come down and see me and you can continue or start your testing. We'll deal with it. Dictionaries, thesaurus, bilingual dictionaries and calculators are embedded in the test. So we're encouraging students to use those, but we will also provide paper dictionaries, thesaurus, and bilinguals, along with a few calculators. It's just not going to be one per kid. Anytime that a kid needs a handheld calculator or dictionary, the test administrator must walk it to the student, and then when they're done, you take it back. Students are not passing back and forth themselves. That would be kind of a cheating feel. The math, the calculators, there's 3 of them in there. It's graphing for function and decimals. The writing prompt, any student can have the writing prompt read aloud to them. Our students typically don't ask, but if they do, you would just lean over their shoulder, read it to them in a voice they can hear, and move on. No clarifying, no helping, or anything like that. Time limit policy for the testing room. This needs to be filled out completely and posted on the door so we can keep up with where you're at on your time limits. If you have a room with extra time and no extra time, make sure that you indicate that on the form so that when we walk around, um, we know what's going on in there. I already talked about rosters. You're just going to have one, and you're going to record all those things on that individual roster. Another good practice is recording the student's stop time on their test ticket when they finish, so you have a backup in case you forgot to write it on the roster. For attendance, the way that we take attendance at Tomball High School, as you're familiar with, is we will come around and get the tickets of the kids who are not there. And then you'll keep the roster and the tickets of the students who are there. So just make a pile of absent student tickets and we'll come around and get them. Never tape any roster or testing materials to the door like tickets. That is a big no-no. Only the signs that you're required to put up. Student breaks, we kind of addressed that already. With lunch, we're going to make it a kind of game time decision. For this session, if students are still testing at, let's say, 10:45, then we will walk them down to get a lunch and bring them back to your room to finish testing. Here's the list of your responsibilities during testing. I'm not going to read them to you. I'd like you to pause the video and review them. Always active monitoring. Read the testing script is exactly as it's supposed to be, and secure all materials and account for materials. Returning materials. There's two kinds. There's non-secure and secure. Go ahead and pause the video and read that. I'm sure you can. Down here, incident or emergency. We've kind of already talked about that. Get my cell phone number in your phone and make sure you have the testing room number handy as well. Anything suspicious, cheating, or it looks like a kid has a phone or anything, please just contact us and we'll come down and investigate it. But continue to let the room test unless it's an extreme disturbance. If the fire alarm goes off, grab your roster is the only thing you need to grab so that you can go outside and account for your students. Everything else can stay. This is a time that you can abandon materials during a fire alarm or an evacuation. Okay, and just kind of here toward the end, so we've gone through the one pager. Also in the email, there's going to be a suggestion for you to review the PowerPoint, which is basically everything that's on the one pager. So if you're newer to this, I suggest reviewing this PowerPoint. It's relatively short considering. Again, review all the tabs down here. It's not super important. The most important thing is that you know where you're testing. And then the materials control. And then the last thing that you have to do before you can test is take this little quiz here. It's pretty straightforward. It would be hard to make mistakes on it. So make sure you get that done and submitted before you come and see me on Monday so you can sign your security oath that day. I hope you don't have any questions. We'll see you Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, and Thursday or Friday.